Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Alisa Bierria. I'm a co-founder of Survive and Punish. Thank you. Yes, Survive and Punish. Welcome. This is our second national convening. Our first national convening was in Detroit, I believe, at the Allied Media Conference. Thank you. Thank you. In 2017, who was at Detroit in our first a good bit of you. Okay, welcome back, y'all. I wanted to start us off with a quote. I'm a co-founder of Survive and Punished, and I co-founded that with a group of incredible comrades as in my capacity as a member of the Free Marissa Now mobilization campaign. Marissa Alexander, as I'm sure you all know, defended her life from her abusive husband. She fired a warning shot. Some have called that the warning shot heard around the world. She caused no injuries. She was in Florida. She tried to invoke Stand Your Ground. She's a black woman, mother of 3, and thus she was denied the right to have Stand Your Ground immunity from prosecution. At that moment, she was being interviewed by the media, and she was telling that person that this is my life that we're talking about. And she said, if you do everything to get on the right side of the law, and it is a law that does not apply to you, where do you go from there? And I always come back to that quote, because when I first heard it, I remember feeling a sense of despair that I think she was pointing to. And, but as time went on and as the campaign went forward, and particularly as she was eventually freed, and thank you to everyone in the room that helped make that freedom happen, I rethought about that quote and decided to hear it as a provocation, a challenge to everyone who watched that happen and needed to figure out how to build a completely different pathway to freedom and liberation that in a world that does not acknowledge your right to exist and to thrive. And so that's where Survive and Punish came in. In the historic Detroit convening in 2017, many of you were there. It was a wonderful, beautiful, warm event. I felt that it was historic. I had never seen an event that focused on criminalized survivors of domestic and sexual violence, an event that brought criminalized survivors to the foreground and gave all of us an opportunity to learn directly from their powerful experiences as organizers and activists and visionaries. Since that Detroit convening, there have been so many wonderful successes. I'd like to ask folks from Survive and Punish California to please raise your hands. Yay! Yeah. I'm just going to start out with California because I live in California.
Hey!
Yeah, so there we are. And in California, over the past couple years, we've been working on a major commutations campaign to focus and get more survivors out of prison. Freedom has been our #1 priority. And since then, we have seen a lot of freedom, more freedom than I anticipated that thought could happen in that brief period of time. So we've seen the commutation of people with life without parole, Cristina Martinez, Gabriela Solano, Tammy Garvin, Barbara Chavez, Kellyanne Savage. We've seen the successful parole of Lynn Noyes and Kelly and Barbara. We've seen the freedom of wonderful Nia Nourn, and it's just been such an incredible ride, and I just want to take a minute to give everybody a round of, those wonderful survivors a round of applause and a welcome back. If you're from Survive and Punish New York, can you give me your hand and do a what? So Survive and Punish New York is almost as good as Survive and Punish California.
Yeah! Wow. Totally okay.
I'm just kidding. They're equally as good. It's been incredible to watch Survive and Punish New York grow like fire. Like it feels like fire. The growth is really fast, and the work that y'all have been doing, like I can feel it all the way on the West Coast. It's exciting. Y'all have been doing these incredible direct actions. You've been having very particular impact on the state governor's race. You've changed that conversation in really powerful ways. We saw some wonderful dialectics going on between California and New York, whereas in California we saw a historic number of commutations. We saw in New York Cuomo wasn't doing shit, right? And so we had the opportunity to juxtapose those two realities and to basically raise the consciousness, raise awareness about life sentencing and the need for freeing people who have these long sentences, particularly survivors of violence, which I also think helped to change the conversation and help to create a climate in which Cyntoia Brown eventually saw freedom as well. It's really incredible. And also, throughout that 2 years, Survive and Punish has produced really exciting material. So there has been the production of the Defense Campaign Toolkit, the research guide, which we talked about yesterday, the Criminalized Survival Curriculum. If you had anything to do with the production of those media, those guides, can you please raise your hand? Yeah. Thank you so much. Those documents are a labor of love. They were collectively produced. They were driven by the fire of the great Miriam Kaba. So, yeah, I don't know, is she here? Don't even try it. I know she hates that, so that's why I did that. We've had Twitter storms, we've had weeks of action, there have been beautiful artwork, we've occupied the streets of New York, we've occupied ICE detention in California. We've been fucking shit up, you know? It's good, it's great. So I'm so excited to continue to change this conversation around surviving domestic and sexual violence and ending domestic and sexual violence and abolishing prisons and all forms of criminalization and building that freedom path that Marissa Alexander invited us to start building, right? So welcome to the second national convening of Survived and Punished, where we will continue to build that path and, you know, think about ways to fuck some shit up. Hello. Our first keynote panel is Participatory Defense Campaigns as a Strategy for Freedom. So I'd like to invite our distinguished panelists up to the front of the room, please. That would be Cherelle Baldwin, Ceyenne Doroshow, Michelle Horton, Nourn, moderator Hyejin Shim, and we are hoping to get Kelly Savage on Zoom.
She's on Zoom.
She's on Zoom. Hey, Kelly, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, girl, how you feeling? Great. All right, so we're going to get that panel started. Please help me welcome our first keynote panel.
Good morning, everyone. Who's a morning person? Not me, and I'm still a little jet lagged from being on California time, but I am so happy to be here with you all and to see you. I hope I get to meet a lot of you today. My name is Hyejin, and I'm a co-founder of Survived and Punished. I organize with California Survived and Punished, and I'm honored to be here with all of you, and especially with our panelists, many of whom I met through first working on their defense campaigns. I first started organizing defense campaigns with the Stand With Nunhi campaign in California as a domestic violence advocate with a shelter in San Francisco. And I quickly realized how seamlessly abuse from batterers melded and transforms into the violence of police, prosecutors, prisons, and deportations. It's been about 3 years since we started Survived and Punished, Stand With Nunhi, Free Marissa Now, California Coalition for Women Prisoners, and Love and Protect. And it's been amazing to see this work grow. And it wasn't that we were alone in doing the work before, but that many people were doing the work before also, just in isolation from each other. So building this movement to free survivors together has been an amazing way to grow not only our efforts, but our sense of scale in what is possible. Efforts to organize on behalf of survivors can sometimes repeat a dynamic in which victims and their pain go seen, but their voices go unheard. This is in part due to the repressive nature of the legal systems that cage them, that first retaliate against survivors for not being the right kinds of victims, and then ramp up punishments for those who continue to fight back, who continue to fight for their lives. Sometimes the response to survivor criminalization is to fight for them by molding them into the shape of a more recognizable victim. And we saw this in the case of Cyntoia Brown so clearly, where she was repeatedly called a sex slave by the media and by people who wanted to help because it got attention, even if that was not her self-definition of her experience. The existing paradigms for recognizable, sympathetic victims not only limits survivor self-determination, but also our imagination for how survivors deserve to be seen and supported. So this panel is an opportunity to listen to advocates and organizers who are also formerly incarcerated to reflect on defense campaigns as a political strategy. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. First here we have Nia Nourn. Nia was criminalized for surviving an abusive relationship as a teenager and sentenced to life without parole for her abusive boyfriend's deadly violence. After 16 years in prison, Nia finally won parole, but immigration officers arrested her at the prison. Although she was a US permanent resident, Nia's conviction made her subject to mandatory deportation. Nia was born in a refugee camp in Thailand after her mother fled genocide in Cambodia. In November 2017, after an outpouring of community support, Nia walked out of jail for the first time in over 16 years. Since her release from ICE detention, Nia continues her advocacy work as an organizer with Survived and Punished and the Asian Prisoner Support Committee. Nia is a 2018 Yuri Kochiyama Fellow of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus. Cherelle Baldwin, right to my left, is from Bridgeport, Connecticut. Cherelle was raised by her mother, who was a single mom. She went to grade school and graduated high school in Bridgeport. In 2011, Cherelle met and became pregnant by her son's father. Over the years, he became abusive. In 2013, the abuse got so bad that she got a protective order to keep him away from her. On May 18, 2013, he violated that order and entered her house, trying to kill her. At that moment, Cherelle knew it was him or her. She did what was best to defend herself from any more harm that he was causing her. You get around for Cherelle. Michelle Horton helped start the Nicole Armando Community Defense Committee, a group of women in New York's Hudson Valley committed to helping Michelle's younger sister, Nikki Armando, find freedom and justice. In September of 2017, her sister Nikki was arrested and subsequently charged with second-degree murder for killing her abuser. Since that day, Michelle, a single mom, quit her job to take care of Nikki's two traumatized children, now 4 and 6 years old, as well as to support her sister's defense. Nikki's murder trial is set for later this month in Poughkeepsie, New York. She is currently out on $600,000 bond after a year-long effort to raise bail funds and remains on electronic monitoring throughout trial. Can we get a hand for Michelle? Ceyenne Doroshow is a compassionate powerhouse performer, activist, organizer, community-based researcher, and public figure in the trans and sex workers' rights movements. As the founder and executive director of GLITZ, She works to provide holistic care to LGBTQ sex workers while serving on the following boards: Sex Worker Organizing Project USA, Caribbean Equality Project, SOAR Institute, and NYTAG. As an international public speaker, her presentations include the Desiree Alliance, Creating Change, Sister Song, Harm Reduction Coalition, and the International AIDS Conferences. She was a featured MC for Toronto Pride and MoMA PS1 Sex Worker Festival of Resistance, lifting her voice as a trans woman of color. Ceyenne has been heavily featured in the media, has performed on television for Showtime's Oz for the documentaries Red Umbrella Diaries and Miss Major. Known for her skills in the kitchen, Ceyenne co-authored a Caribbean cookbook, Cooking in Heels, while incarcerated on prostitution charges. She is currently working on her second book, titled Falling into the Fire. Get around for Ceyenne. And joining us over the phone today is my friend Kelly Savage. Kelly served 23 years in prison for surviving a domestic violence relationship. She was attempting to leave when her ex-husband found out and took her son Justin's life. Justin was only 3.5 years old. Kelly was alone and isolated in a small town 6 hours away from any support. Her attorney chose to allow her abuser's attorney to prepare the entire 4-month trial. Kelly believes that if she had the support of Survived and Punished, she would not have suffered alone, not only during the 3 years in county jail, but the next 7 years in prison before somebody actually told her that it was not her fault. For Kelly, offering support to incarcerated survivors means even more than freedom. Being alone at the worst possible time in life is the most horrible feeling, and no one should have to endure that alone. Can we get around for Kelly? Okay, so I'm going to start with our first question with this powerhouse panel. And I'm going to start to the far left with Nia. And everyone's going to have 4 minutes. Stacy will have signs for timing. And yeah, right there will be the sign for how much time you have left. So the first question is, why is ending the criminalization of survivors important to you?
Hi everyone. First I just want to say I'm so very grateful and honored just to be here. I'm really blown away and really emotional right now. I'm just taking this all in, so thank you. So the question, why is fighting for the criminal survivors important to me? It's 3 reasons. One, because it's very personal to me. Those that are survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence out there, we know what it feels like to have experienced it, and what would I look like if I turned my back? And with the knowledge that I know, that lived experience, to have my loved ones, to have those that I did time with, even those I don't know, having a moment a day with them, being in their cage room, thinking, who's out there fighting for me? Who's out there listening to me? Who's out there sharing my story? Who's out there willing to provide that support? Because the isolation is really real. Even though you're roomed with peers around you, folks, families to come visit you, phone calls, there's that sense of companionship with survivors amongst each other. And as well, for me to be here, I'm not really free. I've shared that in my previous talks that though I do have my physical freedom, I'm still very much caged in, because there's this anger inside of me that as long as there's survivors inside, we're not free. Not one of us are free. And as well, being able to share my story, being able to share my narrative, to shift that change, that we are humans, we do all make mistakes, and we unfortunately do have to pay that time, and why should we continue to criminalize facing deportation, separation from families, from loved ones? And I think that definitely it's a powerful movement of being together and in unity, and I'm just so very grateful to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Nia.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. My name. I'm a little nervous. I usually Well, name is Cherelle Baldwin. I was incarcerated for 3 years, 2 trials. My first trial was a hung jury. My first trial was a hung jury. My second trial, I was acquitted. While I was incarcerated, I felt very alone. I had my mom and siblings and my father, but I just felt very alone until one day I received so many cards, and my mom was like, there's people petitioning for you, and I'm like, huh? I'm just sitting there like, what are you talking about? And she was like, people are writing you letters, and I'm gonna send it to you. And I'm like, you know, why am I incarcerated? For fighting for myself. I wasn't the one going out there looking for trouble. And I felt that was very important to me, that a lot of these fantastic ladies in this room were fighting for me, and gentlemen too. And it definitely helped me day by day, knowing that there's people out there that actually cared about me and never met me a day in my life. I just felt like with that type of support is needed. We all need to stick together because it actually helped free me. I'm working a normal job, 9 to 5. I have my son. My life, I'm not gonna say it's completely normal, but I'm trying to go back to living a normal life after being incarcerated for 3 years. I don't have a criminal record due to the fact that so many people supported me. I was able to be acquitted and just have my son and be able to get a job and go back to school. Go back to school, and I just feel like nobody should be in jail for defending themselves against abusers at all.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Horton. I want to just thank everyone here first of all, and I also want to say that I'm very aware that this is being live streamed right now, and I am at a very particular point where in like the criminal process where I'm very scared to say the wrong thing, so I'm not going to say too much about the case, if anything, but this issue is important to me because it's my life right now, and it's my baby sister who is finally home on bond, that's another topic for another conference, but my experience with that was telling, and in a few weeks, you know, she could be taken away again, and knowing my sister, I mean, it's not just an idea. I'm living it, and I'm watching how really when I read the toolkit for Survived and Punished was the first time that it put language to the fact that my sister lived in an abusive environment and then stepped right into the next abusive environment. And that, you know, people kept saying, how is she surviving this? You know, being held. She was held for, I think, 9 months before she was indicted. And you know, how is she being away from her babies, who at the time were 2 and 4, grieving and just surviving the environment of a jail. And it was because she had learned to adapt to that kind of environment for a long time. And it's just, you know, it's always wrong to dehumanize and to shackle and to strip search, but knowing what survivors have lived and then to have it re-traumatized so particularly has been, I mean, it's inhumane. And it's just so particularly cruel to watch her have to endure those very standard processes, everything from the policing to the prosecution to the environment that is being prepared for right now, which is trial, which could be highly publicized. It is so wrong to have to put them into that very vulnerable situation that so clearly mimics what they have endured for so long. And it's also important to me because I have her babies, and criminalizing a survivor, it's not just about her. Our community has been torn apart. and those children are really traumatized, and their interests and their experiences are not advocated for in any way in the criminal system. There's family court and there's criminal court, and they don't overlap. And so, I mean, it's important to me because this is my life right now, and I might be radiating anxiety, but that's kind of where I am right now. Thank you.
We're gonna start with saying, make sure for Black trans women, we are working stuff. Being Black, being trans, and being Ceyenne Doroshow was very difficult. Somebody told me when I started this work that you can never ever stop. Once you start advocating for community, this is your life's work. Being Ceyenne Doroshow is not easy. I am a survivor. I'm never gonna be a victim, ever. I'm a positively Black trans woman. I sit in the area of being a public, I guess, role model or whatever you want to call it. I'm still a normal bitch like everybody else. But being in this area of decrim and what that means and decriminalization in New York, for a Black trans woman, it means absolutely nothing. Let me be very clear here. My Black ass will still go to jail for something I may be innocent of. It's common that I'm going to go to jail for something way less important or serious than anybody else. So all of these laws and benefits that people are saying we're going to have, when you got this pigmentation, I'm sorry. You're gonna be criminalized on many levels. If you're a Black trans woman, triple that. Regardless to what these laws are gonna be setting in place, they're not for me. They're not, my experience is never gonna be your experience or your experience because you don't have my experience, which is point. But it's very difficult to navigate these waters and how we deal with politics and also dealing with the everyday person. I'm dealing with sex workers, I'm dealing with abuse. Just yesterday, I got a woman and her kids to safety. I literally went into a man knocking this woman in the head yesterday. I could have got my ass kicked. But my job is to answer that call when somebody calls me and says, listen, this is bad and I need to get out. So it was my lead to go and be with her till the cops came, which I don't like because that too, for a Black woman, looks very different. And so I had to stay through that negotiation and also convince her to leave. And that's hard when you're a parent and you're an ex-sex worker and you've dropped everything to try to live a normal life and then have your partner throw it up in your face where you came from. Well, I can positively say I may not be selling it like I used to, but I'm still a whore. Because now I'm working for saving people's lives, and that's what this is about. It's about going to Congress and politicians and telling them I deserve real rights. Not what you're glossing over, real rights that saves humanity. And if I can do it as a Black trans woman, all of you can do it.
Kelly, can you chime in for why ending this criminalization of survivors is important to you? Kelly, are you there?
I can hear you. I think for me, the biggest thing to remember is that there is so many who do it alone and feel that shame and the guilt because they're doing it alone. When we don't find someone to assist us, we tend to take on the shame of whatever that circumstances turns out to be, instead of acknowledging that maybe there's limits. And as survivors, we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that there is absolutely nothing else that we can do to change our circumstances at that moment. For me, knowing that I left so many other survivors behind in prison weighs heavy, because as I help them in their process and understand why they made the decisions they made, I know that they're still being punished every single day for whatever decisions they made. And I know that no matter how important one single case is, there's at least 20 more happening at that same exact time where they're sitting in silence and they're sitting in hurt. And so that's why it's important to me to end the criminalization of survivors.
So I'm going to go to our next question. How has it felt to be at the center of a defense campaign or fighting to free your loved ones?
So those that don't know me, I am really an introvert. It felt very honoring, grateful for myself, because before even my release, during my incarceration, my case, I was demonized as shamed, to be this evil, this you know, as Asians, we're supposed to be like the model minority. And being sentenced to life without at a young age, at 20 years old at that time, I internalized it that really, yeah, it is my fault, that I was responsible for my abuser's behavior, and that I should have, you know, prevented my victim, his death. And then being able to tell my story, and without it being questioned, the totality of it, how, you know, not being picked apart through attorneys, you know, people started believing my story, that I never wanted my victim dead. It was out of fear for my safety, for my life. And slowly they were reaching out to me and said, yes, it was not your fault. That you were not responsible for your co-defendant's behavior, who was twice your age. And I started to, you know, think about, you know, those things that were telling me, and I said, you know, you're right, because ultimately, you know, as survivors at Kelly, I shared that sometimes we really, you know, feel like it's our fault, that we should have known better. But people, they told me, they said, we believe in you, how can we help provide support for you? And being able to reach out and said, how can you help fight, you know, for my freedom? I want out of here. And I was able to say, okay, here's my attorney right there, Anu Prasad, my immigration attorney, amazing. He was part of my strategy for my immigration defense campaign, as well as Survivor Punish California. That's how I got to know them, and they were willing to put themselves in the front line to tell my story, that, you know, to shift that narrative that she does deserve her freedom. And it empowered me to continue to show my story, to not kind of like see people as judging me. And it's just, I can't, I'm very grateful for the support, because it's just overwhelming. It's just, my freedom was, even me sitting here, it's just not unreal to me, because it's not even possible for you to be here, because you should have been deported a long time ago, or you should have been still sitting, rotting away to die in prison, because I never was to be you know, sent to life without, to be free. So it's very grateful and honoring. So thank you.
During the 3 years that I was incarcerated, at first I felt very ashamed of my situation. I wouldn't really talk about it. But then when I started seeing the petitions and the cards and all the love that was getting sent to me while I was incarcerated, I felt very grateful. But the reason I was sad on the other hand is because a lot of women in there were facing the same thing I was, and they were not getting the attention I had. There was about 5 women that was on trial during the same time I was. and I was the only one that got acquitted. And when they came back from court, they were crying because some of their trials ended before mine. And some of their trials ended before mine, and they were like, you know, I got found guilty, or, you know, I'm gonna be facing life, and, you know, I felt like all hope was, I was giving up. But I was receiving so much attention that it helped me a lot. And I think campaigning, all the campaigning for me definitely helped with my situation. And I think we have to start doing that for a lot of people that's incarcerated, wrongfully convicted, or pending conviction. And I am very grateful for that. I don't know how it happened, but I am very grateful because a lot of women in there are still in there, and they're still fighting. 20 years later, they're still fighting. And I think that we can still even help those people. I've seen a lot of people come out after 20, 15, 10, 13 years. So I think us sticking together and campaigning for these women will really help for the future. And I think it's the more and more people we get, the better it will help. And that's how I feel about it.
So my situation is a little unique in that I am working closely with the Defense Committee every step of the way. And when it happened, I mean, it sent out shockwaves, and people naturally gravitated towards us. So we had this group of women who, you know, we were texting back and forth, and a lot of these women I had never known, and if I had known them, it was in a very different context. And then we got the language of a defense committee, and we understood what we were doing, and it gave us a purpose, and it gave us language. But I also was in it in a very different way, because I had, shortly after it happened, my mom got very sick, and she ended up passing away a few weeks ago, and then you know, working with therapists and supporting the children through this, and all of the other traumatizing aspects of it. I couldn't do this by myself. There's absolutely no way. And it was the support of other people who knew her or who had never known her. And a lot of that is the work of not just our little group, but of Survived and Punished as a whole. And you know, in some ways it allowed me to productively channel a lot of the passion I was feeling about the injustice, and then in another way it really has carried me and other members of the committee along the way. My mom passed away a week before we had a big fundraiser, and Eve Ensler was coming, and we had 2 weeks to put it together, and I couldn't do any of it. I mean, it wouldn't have happened if it was up to me, and the committee really rose, and they put it together, and it was beautiful, and it was successful. And the women in Survived and Punished New York know that one of the biggest hurdles we have faced as a defense committee is having so much to say and not being able to say it yet. You know, when is the right time, and what is the right press strategy, and as potential witnesses, all of the complications that come with that. So I think it's helped my sister in feeling less alone, and it has given her hope. And right now, in particular, it's the hardest because we're facing the reality of the criminal justice system and the reality of the odds that she's facing. And just coming here and seeing all of the support for the issue at large gives us a lot of hope, because sometimes it can feel crushing what we're up against.
I have an unusual story. So before I was arrested, I was on the Hudson County Planning Council. I was on the Ryan White HIV Planning Council. I was the coordinator of Jersey City Connection, which is a GLBT organization first dealing with transgender women in Hudson County. I worked 14-hour shifts a day and still did not have my needs met, but I was meeting community needs. And I had a fetish ad that was online, fetish in New Jersey, that could be considered, as long as there's no transferring of funds, legal. Well, I knew that, and that's why I chose fetish work, but that's not what happened to me. I was locked up. I didn't get the pomp and circumstance of, we're going to do this. I was out the next day. I went to court for 6 months. The DA told me, you'll have no problem. You'll get a ticket and get out. That's not what happened. They put me in 3 pages of the paper. They put an internet interactive map. When you clicked it, it took you to my door, upstairs, to my apartment. They put me in harm's way in Hudson County. It almost destroyed my life. Every trip in New Jersey was outside my very quiet neighborhood where nobody knew my business. I think which was more shocking to me being an advocate at that stage in my life was that there was a brothel right across the street from the police station full of Latino women, but they came 10 blocks away from the police station to my apartment for fetish work. So clearly I was sought out. But the domino effects of this arrest was my mom didn't talk to me for years. My community that I had worked for, and this is from New Jersey to New York, all called me with the sighs of, oh, why? Oh, girl, you? Really? And I needed help. I needed my community to embrace me and ride. I had lawyers that didn't even know me rock my case. But I also had advocates within our community bleed and suck me fucking dry. They used me beyond compare and pushed me to do this work.
Kelly, can you share how it has felt to be at the center of a defense campaign or fighting to free your loved ones? Kelly?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think for me, it was amazing to know that I actually had the opportunity that people would support me. And it was difficult to know that I had that ability and feel overwhelmed at the idea of what everybody was doing for me. I didn't realize just how many people supported me until I had the opportunity to look at some of the different information from people, knowing that people were writing encouraging words that I didn't believe. I didn't believe that I had a right to it. I didn't believe that I deserved it. And so that was really difficult. I didn't know how else to get the help I needed, except to honestly look at some of the things that were being said to me and know that I actually deserved it. I know that having the opportunity to have my voice out there also allowed other people, because it gave them an opportunity to showcase some of the other cases that also had failure to protect, also had the ability to look at their situation because I was willing to put myself out there. So by doing that, it allowed other people to also get some assistance as well. I know that when doing that, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was very difficult to put myself out there and know that I could be judged. But the truth is, the worst judgment has come from myself, knowing that I didn't have the ability to change my circumstances on my own. Having the help from others, I knew, even though it was difficult and even though I feared, judgment at times, there was a slight part of me that feared repercussions on the inside, because people were getting access to those articles. And one of my articles was printed in a college paper and a college book as well. And when that happened, one of my staff actually was attending a class and just happened to have to read that article, and it was a classroom setting of, do I deserve to get out? And this is my situation, and as a criminalized survivor, do I deserve to get out of prison? And she had to stand up there and honestly say, I know this person and I know her circumstances. And that wasn't very fair that she had to go through that. And I created that situation because I put myself out there, because I needed that assistance and I couldn't live in that fear anymore. So I know that all the campaigning that was done in my behalf was worth it, obviously, because I'm free, but also it was worth it because it started a conversation that was left in the dark a lot.
Thank you, Kelly. So we're going to go to our next question, and thank you all of you so much for sharing not only your powerful experiences, but also your powerful insights. So the next question is about strategy, and oftentimes, there is kind of this dynamic where because of the barriers of isolation and incarceration, sometimes I think for defense campaigns it can be a challenge to keep survivors in the loop of their own campaigns, which is so critical that survivors also have their self-determination when it comes to who is advocating on behalf of them. So my next question is, what strategies were used to connect the fight for your freedom or your loved one's freedom to the freedom of others and the larger issue of criminalized survival?
When I was finally found suitable for release by the parole board, ultimately California, the governor has the final saying whether to agree to release me or not. And by that time, Asian Law Caucus, Czar and Punish, and other orgs had reached out to the governor asking, please grant her freedom. They flooded his office, like over 500 postcards, and called his office, like, once you do grant her, can you please not hand over to ICE? He does have the authority to prevent that, but it's never been really exercised by the governor. Fortunately, when I was free, I was picked up by ICE, and what they wanted to help me with is, how can we help provide the best support for you while you're in detention, because time in there is very isolating. It's 24 hour lockdown, and it's like being re-arrested all over again. You don't have that programming time in prison. So what they did was help keep me engaged. I was able to write letters, receive postcards, get visits, and preparing for my trial. It was my way of definitely staying connected with community out there, knowing that I do have people that loved and cared for me, that wanted me out. And during my hearings, in ICE detention hearings, it looks really good when the courtroom is filled up, right? That you do have support. And every hearing that I went to, they packed the courtrooms. It was just beyond. I've never get to see the actual live footage, but was able to see the pictures, like wearing T-shirts, on my faces, and they even had a rally at the ICE office. Because of that rally, they ended up now getting it shut down. People are not authorized to enter that building. It was amazing. Yeah, they had a birthday party for me. So, they kept me engaged, but I was able to call in during that time when they had the rally, and yeah, people protest. Surviving Punish California, they're crazy, but yeah, they were willing to put themselves on the line to be arrested. So yeah, I mean, yeah. But that's some of the strategies that were used for my campaign. I definitely think it works for any survivors, getting ready to be fighting for their release if they're in detention, fighting deportation, even in jails. it's those kind of examples that I use. I definitely have worked, as well as commutations campaign that Alisa had described earlier during the opening. It's gotten many of our loved ones, our sisters out free, and overall, I think the meaning, like the messaging, kind of that as immigrants, we're already criminalized during that time, but yet they want to punish us even more. So it's like everybody has a right to be home, to call, this is home, to be with their loved ones and their families. And it's just like, it's just humanity. I mean, like, why do we want to continue mass incarceration, The abolition movement, I think it's beautiful, it's powerful. That's the way to healing, to evolving as humans.
I can honestly say one of the strategies for me was, I remember during my first trial, this is before trial, it was like at one of the hearings, I had a male prosecutor, and I remember him saying, I don't want to prosecute this case because there's a petition, and well, it was told to me by my attorney that there was a petition going around and it was making him nervous. So next thing you know, I went to my next hearing and I had a female prosecutor because he was just like, I don't know what's gonna go on, I'm not gonna try to prosecute this no more. So then she was saying how nervous she was about Okay, so that was unexpected. Hi, they were saying that the petition was making them nervous about my case because so many people were reaching out to the prosecutors and they didn't know what they were going to do. So many people didn't want to prosecute the case in the prosecution office, which was looking good. So I think that was very helpful, the petition, and then knowing that I was getting tons of mail, and I think that that type of strategy helps with a lot of cases. I would say the petition, definitely, things like that, and they see that people are reaching out to the prosecutors. I think that helps in the situation that goes on. It does make them very nervous, even though they seem to be tough, but they get nervous about that type of things because they think that nobody cares about you when you're incarcerated. Right. So that definitely plays a part as all you women come together and put the petition, because I know that I seen Moms United, Survive and Punish, it's a long list of names I've seen, and they were just like, well, who are these people that want this girl out of prison? But it was just like, all these strategies definitely helped me because, like I said, a lot of women weren't fortunate like me to be able to get acquitted and just go on with their life, even though I'm still feel like I'm trapped. But it definitely helped me, and things are moving along. I'm still kind of new to this. I'm learning how to speak out more because for so long I was just so ashamed, and there's a lot of people that'll make you still feel bad. There's a lot of people that's against you. They won't say it too much, but that they're against you. And I have an 8-year-old son. He's actually here with me. He's in the church. Even though he doesn't know what's going on, people say certain things, and it's just like, my life would never be normal ever again. But thanks to all you ladies for thinking of these strategies, ways, and scaring the prosecutors and intimidating them. They don't like that type of stuff. So just know that if you keep doing that, it's going to scare them. And a lot of these women will be free soon. So I just think that helps.
So for us, tying it to the larger issue has been part of our strategy from the very beginning, not just because it's the truth and because it's powerful and the statistics are out there, but because we, quite frankly, needed to raise a ton of money. And we had to do that without talking about the specifics of the case. And we had to make people understand why they should care about this enough to help us with these insane costs, because the prosecution has all the money that they need from taxpayers. And for survivors who are being prosecuted, having the right legal team and having the right experts, this is very costly. And having the money to pay for these things is what will help people be able to understand and believe the truth, the jury. So we're kind of in a particular place where after, if there is a conviction and the fight continues, you know, then the strategies will continue. But for us, it's really been, we've been using it in a fundraising capacity. And I just need Miriam and everyone at Survive and Punish New York. I am blown away by your support and help because it is overwhelming. Our family doesn't have money and our community is only so big. And we have had, thankfully, you know, people keep reminding us that there are so many women who don't have the support that my sister has. And we're so grateful for that. But tying it to the larger issue is important on just so many levels for us. And we're gonna continue to do that in the fight, like you were saying, like when you're in this, we're in this now. And you know, we started a website, which is even hard to do because of what we can say and what we can't say on it. But you know, we stand with Nikki, but we also stand with all criminalized survivors. And this is something I'm committed to. And I know a lot of us, all of us on the committee are committed to continuing this work.
Labor, see this? So strategies. You know, I'm the proud child of Flawless Sabrina, aka Jack Doroshow, and Miss Major Griffin Gracie. Two icons in the movement. One just passed away, the other one is not going anywhere. I have to say, you know, support. When you look at strategies, we're blessed here in New York and in San Francisco, and some of y'all are my family from Oakland and San Francisco. Thank you for Columbia for doing this. My sister right here, Janetta, runs an organization that does letter support, which is amazing and needed. That is an interaction, that's a strategy, because you're able to have conversations. F to L, which does court support here in New York, are amazing, because that's the work to see some smiling faces that look like you in a courtroom. I go above and beyond. I'm like in your face when you get out. I'm that person, but we also have a scholarship program for your last year of jail before you get out, and that's SWAT behind bars. So I'm heavily resourced, and this resource, so you can build your plate before you hit the streets, to utilize that scholarship. And we need to be pushing on our sisters and brothers in jail. We need to be helping them understand, and education is going to help them go so much further. That's a strategy that counts. That's something that is ching-ching. When you can help somebody see a different light and guide them into another way of being, then you're doing the work. I'm always gonna be criminalized, always. No matter what, if I'm too pretty, if I'm too stylish, if I'm too black, I'm too trans. There's no strategies for all of this. But we have to think, when it comes to our sisters and brothers behind bars, how to make this process flow. How can we really strategize to give them a better tomorrow in reentry?
Hi, Kelly. We can see you now. We're so excited. It's your turn.
I think for me, knowing that there's so many still stuck, that's the truth of it. It's not a matter of doing time in incarceration. They are stuck in a system that criminalizes them. Even at a basic hearing, can they see their families? How often can they see their families? In California, they've now allowed family visits. But of course, that criminalized survivor isn't going to be allowed to see, they're not going to be allowed to do those 24-hour visits because it involves a family member or a loved one. Even if it's a divorced loved one, even if that person violated their home and came in and assaulted them, they still are criminalized for that offense. So they don't get that visit. And when they go to committee to fight for it, they're judged all over again. So for the bigger whole, knowing that people are fighting to change that, one simple, signing of a petition to somebody sitting in a conference like this, if they could see a conference like this and know that there are people out there fighting for them, I think it would change some of their perspective. They're not alone. And so for me, educating them on what I was doing during my campaign was important. Of course, immediately it was, what can I do to get support like that? And if we have the opportunity to open up to more individuals, then I think it would make all the difference. If you're talking about someone who is currently taking classes and trying to get support for domestic violence, they're already on that road to healing in a way, but also in an acceptance of the judgment that they might receive. And so I know that that would be beneficial for them to just be aware that there's people that are fighting. When I was doing all the different articles and the different campaigning about my situation, I was able to allow them to see that people cared enough. I had all these amazing statements sent to me from complete strangers, letters, cards. I had so much support that staff actually would call me to the officer station to receive my mail because they were tired of carrying me. And it wasn't about boasting about it. It was about knowing that people cared enough, and I attempted to write back to each and every person because it was important to me to let them know that they took time to care about me, to think about me in that day, and it meant something. So I know that something as easy as that, obviously the big campaigns that are happening, we didn't get to see it. I don't even know what that looks like for me. I know you guys did it. I know the work was done for me, but I don't know what it looks like. So I can't wait to be involved in somebody else's campaign, as well as continue to support the ladies that are still stuck. And they are stuck, that's the truth of it. They're stuck, and they need to know that you guys are fighting for them. And I'm hoping that you guys continue to do that.
So all of you thus far have described just the interconnectedness of surviving violence and of incarceration, of criminalization, and that there are so many people inside and outside who are being criminalized and policed all the time. And so surviving violence is also interconnected with multiple issues such as racism, anti-blackness, transphobia, sexism, criminalized migration, poverty, ableism, failing to protect, quote unquote, failing to protect children, and so on. So how can we use defense campaigns and organizing for survivors to expose these conditions and the ways that survivors are made more vulnerable to criminalization because of these other forms of violence? How can we use organizing and defense campaigns to make those connections more clear?
I think definitely before a survivor become criminalized, the violence of the towards like poverty, discrimination, gender, it's from there. It's kind of like bad seasoning. When you put all that together, it's like a bad, terrible recipe, and it becomes like that's how you have a criminalized survivor. So I think with any definitely defense campaigns that has happened, we have to talk about it because it explains the reason why a person is criminalized, right? It's like the bottom and then to the top at what point, and that's how. People that are racist, that are ignorant to the truth of what it means to be a criminalized survivor, they depend on these false ideas, And the only way to kind of like to shift that, to kind of engage them, to kind of like rethink about it, is to talk about how do people end up being in these abusive relationships? How do people end up being arrested, charged, in jailed with these life sentences? Because you have to talk about the racism that's behind it, the people that are poor and what they have. It's like survivorship. How did it all come together? And I think without telling these stories, from that, you can't really tell criminalized survivor stories. And I don't. And I think the more you educate people and talk about that, that's how you kind of reach them. Because I think every person can have deal with racism one point or another, have their own survivorship, correct? And it's just being, again, like sharing more of that. Yeah.
With my situation, I know when I first was incarcerated in the beginning, they would tell me if I was a white woman that it would be totally different. And I try to not look at race, but my attorney, it was coming from him that if I was a white woman, I would never been charged with the crime. And I think that does play a factor in certain situations. And I was criminalized for something, even with having protective order, defending myself, and so much proof that they didn't care. They just wanted me to just take a plea deal and just go on with my life. I'm sorry for the people in the back that can't hear me. Did you guys need me to repeat it back there? Are you good? Okay. And I think that if I didn't speak about it, that it would not help me. I think that the fact that a lot of people spoke about it on my behalf as well, such as my mom, my sister, actually helped. I don't think that no one should be going to jail for being a survivor. And it seems like it's like that nowadays. I think that more women are incarcerated because of that. Majority of women are incarcerated for defending themselves against their abusers. Every single woman I met, it was just because I was defending myself. It was a terrible situation to be so young. I was only 21. I didn't know nothing about the jail system. I had never been to jail. Everything was just so new to me. And for them to tell me to take 20 years and I'll be out soon, to them, was okay. It was just something so horrible. Just take this plea deal and go about your life, basically. Don't fight for your freedom. And I just think that a lot of women do give up, men too. They give up because they're scared of the system. They're scared of what might happen, the consequences. In the beginning, I was scared. I felt like I should have just took a plea deal and everything will be okay. I would never in a million years thought I would be acquitted. But if you fight for yourself and speak up for yourself, and that's what I did. I had to speak up for myself, because if you don't tell your side of the story, nothing will get done. And a lot of women don't speak up for themselves. They have people telling them that it's okay for them to just sit there and be quiet. And I just think that no one should be criminalized at all. I think everybody should get a chance to speak out, defend themselves, even if it's not on their behalf. Like the lady next to me is speaking out for her sister. I just believe that when you have that type of support, that helps so much. It just, even if it's a friend, somebody, at least they know that somebody out there that really care for you. And I know that, how can I put this? There's a lot of people in jail. Maybe there's cases you probably can look up and see who's wrongfully convicted. That might, help. Like Centoya Brown, she was incarcerated for a long time, and look at she's getting out because people actually took time to look into her case and see what actually happened. So it's all about helping, and some women really need that. There's people out there that don't care about them. and there's people that really do. And you guys are awfully, definitely a big help in the community.
So when it comes to the strategies of a defense committee to, tie it back to these core issues, I don't have an answer for that, but I have an intention to want to continue to do that. And this kind of treads into territory that I can't talk about, but I don't think anyone would be surprised that you can't tell my sister's story without talking about childhood trauma. And I don't think you could tell many criminalized people, no matter whether they were survivors of violence or whatever kind of violence they survived, it all goes back to childhood trauma. And because I don't have a very good answer for that question, to kind of talk about childhood trauma a little bit, I don't have an opportunity to say this very often, but one of my biggest struggles in this is I feel like I'm watching the cycle of violence continue, and it's not just because of what the children witnessed and the devastation of losing your parents instantly, but the system as a whole. They went almost 9 months without touching their mother, without seeing her, and it was because the environment at the jail was more anxiety producing, and I had to fight in family court for them to have a private room for them to see, and that was very rare, and they were very resistant to it. But the kids needed that. And when you look at the people in the jail and you imagine them as little children, I mean, hurt people, right? And you have a system that is not only not addressing the trauma that the children are experiencing, but perpetuating it. And if we want less criminals and less survivors, we can't be causing childhood trauma. I mean, this is a system that is perpetuating the abuse, and I'm watching it. And if they didn't have the support that they had, and the therapists that they have working with them, the school that I got them in, and me, who's fighting for them, we would have another generation of potentially abusers, potentially survivors. And this is just an issue that people aren't talking about, and I feel like in the experience I'm living, the children are collateral damage, and it's completely acceptable.
Can I have the question?
How can we use defense campaigns and organizing to expose how survivors are made more vulnerable to criminalization through other forms of violence like racism, transphobia, poverty, sexism, immigration, and so on and so forth?
Brace yourselves, this was only 4 minutes. I've been a survivor since day one, since I identified as other or different. I've been a survivor. Most trans women, black trans women, are survivors. I had to survive some really serious shit. A childhood of complete fuckery. It was amazing educationally. I went to Catholic schools. The abuse was severe just because I was different. And then dealing with the judicial system and going to jail and getting out. And I didn't spend a long time in jail, but those 30 days changed my fucking life. There was in a not balanced situation where as a trans woman, I'm locked in a cell 23 hours and let out for 1 hour to have the police or correctional officers tell other inmates, she's in the paper for being a sex worker. I'm a survival sex worker, first off. I was using survival to take care of a community. There's the crime there. But as a provider in this, the negotiations around taking care of another survivor is serious. When you're a black trans woman and you're in jail, all of this visiting and letter stuff, that is wonderful for you. For a trans woman, you barely get a visit or a letter. Holidays are probably the worst time for a trans woman of color, period, because you're now pushed up against the inmates. You can't go home. You don't even get a phone call. It's hard. It's hard when you're already stigmatized by a system that's gonna further stigmatize you just a little bit more. So all of these situations look different for all of you, which I really commend you for what you went through, but I have sisters that are being raped on a regular basis, probably by the whole entire system. And then you add that into them coming home, fragile, broke, poor. Poverty's real. Poverty is freaking real. To a trans woman, she may not even be able to go to McDonald's and get a job. I'm doing this work to educate girls and community so we can find a better way to build resources for survivors. Other than have people write the narrative, survivors need to be taking care of survivors, and allies need to be taking care of us.
Whoa.
Kelly? Your turn, Kelly.
So I think for me, exposing how difficult it is for someone who is charged under failure to protect is really important. For me, I had a twofold situation. I was hearing impaired and was unable to be allowed access to my hearing aids during my trial until a court order was issued. I had the whole 3 years in county jail where I could look at my hearing aids, but I wasn't allowed to obtain my batteries. So that was really difficult, trying to meet with lawyers, trying to understand what was going on, tended to be really difficult. Obviously, I'm dealing with the shame and guilt and judgment, both from my own defense and others. I was pretty blessed because I had a rare situation where I had police that worked at the county jail that were actually at my home that day and knew that I wasn't at home when the crime occurred. So I didn't receive some of the harsh treatment most of my peers did who had sensitive situations. In incarceration, I never went through a lot of the harassment, bullying, beating. I can think of 2 different girls right now that are sitting in California women's facilities that can't leave their room to do more than work because their roommates basically keep them there. They know their situation, they're bullied on a daily basis, and when they try to move, the staff doesn't allow it. The staff will inform the bully in the room that, oh, she's trying to get out. And so no matter how many attempts that we've made, they haven't been able to leave that situation. It's not uncommon for someone with a sensitive situation to be traumatized repeatedly within the system, both from staff and inmates, which is pretty much common knowledge. Unfortunately, it doesn't change. I'm not saying that we make life easier, but as our famous quote for restorative justice tells us, that everybody is somebody's baby, and a sensitive situation is someone who has either their child has been injured in the process of the crime, both either by the perpetrator being the spouse or by themselves. The woman incarcerated may also be that perpetrator. That person can be somebody who didn't get out in time. And so you're considered the perpetrator as well because you allowed that child to be around domestic violence, drugs, or alcohol, in a vehicle where an accident occurs. So there's several situations where that person is forced into a situation that they can't get out of. And the system will continue to abuse them because of that, as well as I talked about earlier with the visitation. They may not be allowed to have that access to visiting a minor. And in some situations, I understand that there's that belief system that maybe they don't deserve that. But in others, when a child is crying for their mother and they are not in fear of their mother and they want that contact, it's really difficult for the child to understand why they're being denied. And as well as for the incarcerated person who is trying to explain that it's not that I don't want to see you, it's that the system won't allow me to see you. Even with, in some cases, even with court orders, there's a lot of limitations placed on that person. And of course, the children are the ones that pay. If there's a situation where somebody is failing to protect and they're not even in the house at the time, they're not even present in the car when a situation occurs, it does not matter. They're still going to be charged the same way at the other person because it's their child. And so it makes it really difficult for people to get the support that they need. There is obviously violence in many forms in the institution setting, but when it comes to a sensitive situation, you're bashed on many other levels. And for me, I was pretty blessed because I didn't receive a lot of that treatment because people were aware of my situation. So I had people who would entrust in me their, information and ask for support. And I know that at this time, one of my heaviest weights to support the inside is finding a way to support those people, whether they're the perpetrator of the crime or involved in some form or fashion and prosecuted for it. I know that they need support and understanding because the only way to make that better productive citizen is to help them get that healing, whoever they are, whatever their situation is. And as I often remind them, everybody is someone's baby. At the end of the day, everybody is paying the ultimate price, whether it's that victim's family or the person prosecuted for it. They're all paying a price for whatever that crime is. Having someone continuing to victimize them does not help end the cycle. And unfortunately, it's perpetuated by staff as well, because staff will then inform somebody what somebody is incarcerated for. And so that makes it even more difficult.
Thank you, Kelly. I think for a lot of people who do work around domestic violence, there's this educational tool that people use called the power and control wheel. It's basically this circle with like 8 horrible slices, and in the slices it's like physical abuse, emotional abuse, verbal, sexual, financial, coercion and threats, isolation, etc. And this is often used to describe how multiple forms of abuse can be happening within the context of domestic violence. But what we see from all of your stories and all of what you shared today is that these conditions of isolation, of financial abuse, of medical neglect, of all these things, they often precede abuse, and people get stuck into situations, into abusive relationships they can't get out of because a lot of times they don't have the resources, whether that's financial resources, emotional resources, support, to get out. And then they get punished for that further, where you enter a system where all these things are continuing to happen. It's just that I think like Alisa has talked about with me, you have abuse, but the abuser isn't there anymore. And the state takes on the work of the abuser in continuing that cycle. And so that repetition of violence is just so common for people, and it just takes so much work to begin even undoing a piece of that. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to all our amazing